Hey guys, this is Dr. Kelsey here at Kelsey Canine Medical Center out here in Collierville, and it is that time of year. It's a Christmas time coming up, and a lot of you guys are going to be purchasing a lot of Christmas puppies, I know, and we get a lot of phone calls and stuff, so we thought we would interview and talk to Terry from West Tennessee Canine about some Christmas, or about some puppy questions, behavior, and different things. And so we're just going to start shooting some questions with Terry. Terry, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I am, I turned, I think, 52 this month.
Oh, wow.
What?
Okay.
The beard is starting to take effect, right? I've been training dogs since I was 13. Started with working dogs, hunting dogs, protection dogs, security dogs, and now we train just a lot of pet dogs, lots of them. We get a lot of puppies. If we can get puppies early, we can help curb curb bad behavior.
Sure.
You know, stop things before they start.
Right, for sure. The earlier you get them, the better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have a 5,000 square foot facility here in Memphis. We have a facility in Nashville. And we train dogs via Zoom, I think it is now. It used to be Skype,
right.
And now it's Zoom.
Yeah.
All over. And so it's exciting. Lots of dogs, lots of things happening. We never run out of work.
Right. Plenty of them, and especially since COVID, a lot of people have gotten puppies and stuff. So,
absolutely.
All right, so let's just start with kind of the first kind of basic question is, when you get your puppy, and you've been home with them now for maybe a day or two or three, what's kind of the first couple of things that you think it's important to work with them on?
Oh, that's a
big question.
But it's a perfect question. So when we get our puppies, what we want to do is give them everything, right? We want to make them our little child,
right?
Which is the worst thing to do. Now, I will admit that I'm guilty of doing that myself. Getting a puppy and you want to hold it. But the longer I live and the more puppies I get, the less I do this. So when you bring a puppy home, the best thing to do is bring the puppy home and put it in his kennel for a while. Try not to start sleeping with you. Try not to start it with the dog on your lap. Try not to start the things that are going to give separation anxiety later.
Okay.
All right?
Makes sense.
So the puppy has gone from being with a breeder, and a lot of good breeders will start to separate them early. But a lot of puppies come from shelters, and they're just with a whole bunch of dogs, right?
Right.
And so we take them out of their natural environment with all these dogs, and now they're alone, right? So when you bring them home, find a nice cozy spot for them in a corner, kennel, cover them up, I like to put music playing, some soft music, or a sound machine, and just kind of let them process for a while. Just let them process the sounds. We want to limit their visual input. That way they're not fearful what's going on. They're just able to sit in a safe place and just take it all in. And if you let them do that for a couple hours, you'll see when you bring them out, they will be a lot more acclimated to what's going on and not just going from hand to hand to hand.
Right.
Because once you start that, everybody's holding the puppy's falling asleep on your lap, and then it comes nighttime. It's time for the puppy to go to bed, and the puppy is not going to bed, and neither is anyone else, right? So when you bring that puppy home, the first thing to do is kind of get it separated and alone for a minute, just let it acclimate for a few hours and let it just chill out. I would say that would be my first bit of advice. Okay.
So what about for those that maybe have other pets, other dogs or cats? We talk about, in an introduction, I kind of call it a supervised session where you're not just leaving them and turning them out, but any tips on that when they get if they have other dogs, older dogs, stuff like that?
Yeah, 100%. So the best thing to do when you bring a puppy into the house is to make it none of anyone else's business as far as animals go. Let them coexist for a good period of time. Sometimes that is a day, a week, a month. What we don't want to do is start that arousal right in the beginning. We want them to coexist where the dogs are smelling each other,
right.
They're able to see each other, but not right on top of each other. If there's going to be a problem, it's going to be with the pressure of that first interaction. So just coexisting for a while,
right.
Getting used to each other without actually meeting is the best way.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, good. Initial introduction of your puppy to your other dog or even cat possibly, but so what is it, fast forward a few days or some time frame into that, what does it look like?
So when you feel like it's the appropriate time, and some dogs are really good with puppies, some dogs aren't. You can kind of count on male dogs not being as into puppies as female dogs. That's just a general rule, but not all the time. You're going to have them both on a leash and just have them in the room coexisting with each other, right? Especially the puppy on the leash, because the puppy doesn't understand personal space. And some adult dogs don't appreciate them not understanding personal space. So
Right.
if you just start to have them out together, puppy on a leash, the adult dog on a leash at first until you find he or she may not be as interested as the puppy is in them. And once you get them calm, like test the boundaries, test the waters. It's going to happen different with different dogs. My personal dogs are around all kinds of dogs all the time. So when a dog comes into our house, it's like just another day, right? But if you're not used to that, this puppy is going to be like, oh, what's this thing moving around? And what we're trying to do is squash that arousal, because that's where the accidents happen. And you get puppies getting bit or hurt or scared
Right.
of the other dogs. So just take it real slow is the best advice. Just always on a leash, always have control. You can do it through a baby gate. There's all kinds of ways to
Right. Yeah. Okay. And I know, we mentioned earlier, I didn't know if you want to add an additional comment about the crates. I know you are a big fan of the crate. Sometimes we have to convince our clients, to purchase one because they want, like you said, they want to sleep with them the first night, and you're like, that's really not probably the best idea.
Yeah, and truth be told, like I like my dogs to sleep with me. Until I got married, my dog slept with me.
Right.
Right. But I did crate train them.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they didn't do it as a puppy.
They didn't.
Right.
They did not do it as a puppy. And the reason for that is because if I travel with them, like they need to have a place to go. Or if I get married and sleep with my wife, like they also need a place to go, right? The crate is a place for them to be safe. It's a place that's considered theirs. If I take the crate away from one of my dogs, she freaks out. Like she has to have it. She's a Dutch Shepherd and she has a routine. And you take the crate out of the picture, and she is more of a lunatic than she already is. But it gives them security, gives them a common place to go, a place that's the same every single time, a place that's theirs, a place where they know the rules. Right. The crate training a dog gives them a huge sense of security, confidence. I go in here, and nothing bad happens.
Do you have an opinion on the wire versus a enclosed crate? Some people do ask us about that too.
I do. So for puppies, I like to use an enclosed crate. If you can use an enclosed crate all the way up, it's good. But the bigger they get, they're ginormous.
Right.
But with the puppies, like they like to feel safe and secure, and having the plastic crate, or the ones that are enclosed, allows them to go in there and just chill out. Also allows you to cover it better without them pulling the blanket through, whatever you're covering it through. But it just gives them a huge sense of security having all sides covered. They're in there, they can see out the front. And if you have one that's a little fearful, you can cover the whole thing and just leave a little spot where they can just look out, and put them in the living room and just let them observe. Dogs learn passively. They learn by watching. So that's another little trick you can do.
Okay. And I've always said, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but in the wild, in nature, they're den animals, and so they would create their own, little space, similar to a crate type thing that they're gonna sleep in. That's gonna be their home, kind of thing. So
yeah, and the science behind that is, or the nature behind that is, nothing can get to them from the back, right? They're just having to pay attention up here so they can get in there and feel safe, knowing that if something threatens them, their communication tool, which is their mouth, is right in the front. Like they don't have to worry about something coming from back there. It's coming from in front of them, and it just plays into their genetics.
Right. That's a great point. Okay, so we've had our puppy, I guess, for now a few days, a few weeks. At what point do you recommend your puppy owners to start to work with them, either commands and training and that kind of thing?
Immediately.
All right.
I just met with a breeder last week whose puppies were 5.5 weeks old, and I worked with her on how to start doing food work with the dog, how to start putting food in the kennel and having them walk into a crate and walk out. When I bred dogs for a long time, and when my dogs went home, they were all kennel trained. I started at 5 weeks, and immediately start hand feeding them. That's the key, is hand feeding for focus. So you want everything to come from you. Right. And so if you just hand feed them their meal, just that one simple step, which is training, just hand feed them every single meal you can. Say yes, good, okay. And then you can start luring into sits and downs and all of this stuff. The puppy has no idea that you're teaching it, right?
Right.
Because it's so little. All it just does is wants to eat. So it just wants to eat, and the training part is out the door when it comes to their focus.
Right.
All they know is the food is in your hand, and they're following it. And by doing that, you're patterning behavior. And that's where it starts. The younger you can start that, the better, but I would start them as soon as I get them home.
Okay, good. All right, so we've talked, a good bit about the introduction and things. What about, we've talked about introduction to other dogs. What about introduction to the kids? Be it, maybe you got a toddler or a 3, 4, or 5-year-old, or maybe even a teenager. What are some thoughts there?
It depends on the age. So this can be a very long answer, but I'm going to shorten it a lot. Up to a certain age, a puppy can give a child no value, and vice versa. So if you have an infant and a puppy, like, there's no value there. If you have an adult dog and an infant, there's no value that can be exchanged, right? More accidents can happen rather than good happening. Even with a small puppy and a small baby, their skin's so soft and brittle and just easily damaged to those puppy teeth, like it's done. So they just coexist together. The dog starts to learn the baby sounds, and the baby starts to understand the dogs around. Toddler's a little different. The toddler, does all of this. Yeah. Right. And so a lot of supervision has to be in place for toddlers, because they don't understand the difference between right and wrong. They don't understand not to pull the dog's ears, right? And so when you're allowing them to interact, make sure it's in a very controlled environment. You don't want them sleeping together. You don't want the dog putting its mouth on the toddler. Just because that creates bad habits. The toddler encourages it because of all the movement, and like they're a walking food bank, right? So you have a puppy just following the toddler, so many things negative things can come out of that. So
snatching food out of their hand.
Oh my gosh! You're not going to stop a puppy from following a toddler around. Like, if I'm hungry enough, I'm following a toddler. They're just one in the mouth and one on the floor, right? If it hits misses their mouth, they just keep walking. Puppies are good vacuum cleaners, though.
That's true. Yeah, I found that out too.
Clean it up. Even when we have Christmas dinner, I call the dogs. I'm like, all right, clean it up. And they're like, I don't have to vacuum now. So, as the child gets older and as the dog gets older, they can start to coexist more, but you still want to supervise them. Teenagers have a real bad problem of making the dog their friends, right? So anytime the dog gets in trouble or anything like that, they run to the teenager's room. And then sleeping with kids, that's a big question. Can my dog sleep with the kids? Like, I have no problem with dogs sleeping with people. We train PTSD dogs. We train a lot of dogs for that, right? However, it becomes a problem when the dog starts to guard the child. And it's cute in the beginning, the baby's in the crib or the toddler's in there in the little toddler bed, and the dog's in there, and you're doing stuff, putting the kid to bed, and the dog, and then you're play slapping the kid, and the dog's, you think it's cute, right? Until you have to come see us, because now you put the child to bed and the dog will not let you back in the room. Right. So be very aware of, what looks like fun protection behavior is actually guarding. So with kids, with humans, but especially with kids, we want to make sure we keep the line of the dog is not a human. Right? All these things aren't cute. And kids have a tendency to keep the dogs in a state of arousal all the time. So up until probably 6 or 7, you're like 100% working on the dog to interact with the kids. After 7, you're working with the kids to interact with the dog. It flips. And there are going to be things that happen. There's going to be blood. Somebody's going to get nipped into those sharp puppy teeth. And you really can't discipline the dog for that. Right, because the kids are in there with their hands, they're pulling tails, they're doing all of this stuff. Just make sure that as the child grows, that he or she understands that the dog does have teeth, and they do hurt, and if something severe enough happens, the dog has to go somewhere else, and that's usually the way we lay it out to children.
So we talk about sometimes that the kids are, especially that 3 to 6 year old range, are big squeaky toys. They're running through the house and making noise, and the puppy wants to go chase after them and nip at their heels or do whatever. But and try to avoid that as much as possible. The other thing we see on the medical side is the 4-year-old holds the little teacup poodle and plops out of her hand and happens to break a radius or a bone and. Those can be bad. So, you want, like you said, you want a controlled environment, especially, and not, probably not have the youngster holding a little bitty breakable thing. So
and that's hard. Don't pick the dog up. Like, there has to be a consequence for the child for picking the dog up, because they are fragile. Those little legs are
right. Yeah. What are some kind of first set of command words, or and when do you start applying those command words to your new puppy?
All right. Immediately when the dog comes home, it's yes, good, okay. The first thing I want the dog to do is start to acknowledge me and look at me. And so we're going to hand feed the meals, and then we're going to draw the food to our face, and when the puppy looks at our face, we're going to feed and say yes, good, yes, good, okay. Any positive word we can associate with that food. A fun game to play with puppies to start building recall, like from the beginning, is get them used to getting food from you, then take a little piece and throw it across the floor just a little ways, or even drop it depending on how little they are. They'll get it, then call their name, and then present food. Then do another one, call their name, present food. So right from the beginning, you're teaching the dog name recognition. Yes, good, okay, associated with the food, and then coming when they hear their name.
Yeah.
Because dogs don't understand they're supposed to come when they hear their name. We're like, Fido, get over here, come. And Fido's like, huh?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because even in the context of how you think the dog learned it, the dog really didn't learn it.
Right.
Right? But if you take that puppy and start modeling that behavior from the beginning, just sliding a little piece of food out, saying, yes, Fido, come. The dog will start to understand that there's a reward associated with the behavior.
Right.
Right? And you can teach little sits and downs, all of that stuff right from the beginning. We think a dog has to be 12 weeks, 15 weeks before it can really start learning. And a large reason for that is because that's when they can start coming to a training facility because of all the nastiness,
Vaccines,
right?
right.
But that area between you getting them 8 weeks old and 15 weeks old, they're so impressionable.
Yeah.
Like whatever they experience, positive or negative, during that time is going to stay with them forever.
Right.
Right. So teaching those little commands, sit down. The recall one is probably one of my favorites because that's the hardest thing. The biggest thing people struggle with, and the hardest thing to teach an adult dog is recall.
Right.
Right. But those puppies don't know any different. With our working dogs, like from the beginning, we were teaching them to come back to us because, if they're out in the woods, like you call their name, they need to come back to you.
Right.
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 So that's my favorite one, I believe, is this recall, but right from the beginning.
Do you see them or recommend, somebody says, gosh, I'm busy, maybe I've got kids, I'm working, but how much time realistically do you see or recommend a client or an owner start putting into their puppy in terms of when they get them?
If you do 2 or 3 minutes at feeding time, say you can't do the whole meal.
Yeah.
Right, start the meal. If you want to have a whole litter of puppies, and I have 9, 10, 12 puppies, they're all not getting a 10-minute session because the first puppies are going to be good, but the puppies in there are going to be very angry, and I'm not getting anything done. They want to eat, right? So it may be a 2 or 3 minute session. So as much time as you have, we put ourselves in this time box. I need to spend 30 minutes with this puppy every single day, twice a day, and that lasts for 4 or 5 days.
Right.
So as much time as you can. And you'll be busy sometimes, and you just have to chunk their food down there, and it doesn't ruin them. Pick it up next time.
Right. Okay. And then what are some... we talk about in our little puppy talk with our clients about some things to do with them, touching their feet, their paws, their ears, rolling them over on their back. What are your thoughts on that, or any other additional things they ought to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting their feet wet. Anything you can expose them to gently.
Yeah.
Now, when you're doing water work with them, make sure it's warm water, room temperature water. If you stick them in a pan of ice water, they're going to be upset with you. If the water's too warm, they're going to be upset with you, and you might create a fear issue with water.
Right.
But dogs need baths.
Yeah.
Just get you a little cookie sheet.
Yeah.
And just a little water, and just make it a game where they're walking through it. Right. Anything that we can do to acclimate our dogs to being groomed, handled, flipping upside down. I'm really rough with my puppies. I flip them all different ways. I rub their feet, all kinds of things. Anything I can to contort them. Also, if you're going to be using a Dremel, get a Dremel.
Yeah.
Or go on YouTube and play Dremel sounds. They have them, believe it or not.
Okay.
So the puppy starts to understand it. Then put the Dremel with the puppy. Anything you're going to acclimate the puppy to later on in life, start immediately.
Right.
All of those things. Get used to being handled. And any vet that I know will welcome you to bring them in when their shots are at a certain level, to just put them on the scale. Just get them used to coming in here. Right.
So Terry, what are your recommendations on, we'll talk about, again, we're kind of in the early development a little bit still, but the leash training, have you got any thoughts on the recommendations on how you start the leash? You want this dog to be your buddy and go on 2 or 3 mile walks or jogs or runs in the future.
Yeah, immediately. So even with the puppy folks that I work with, the breeders, as soon as they start weaning that puppy and start hand feeding the puppy portions of their meal, like just a little thin slip lead on their neck,
Yep.
right? And you're hand feeding, you're just tugging slightly. Right, all we're doing is getting the dog comfortable with something around its neck.
Right.
Like you could imagine if you were a child, even as an adult, you're walking down the sidewalk and somebody lassos you and starts dragging you the other way. Like it's an immediate fight,
Yeah.
right? Because we're not supposed to have anything around our necks.
Right.
Well, dogs feel the same way.
Right.
Right. So just getting the dog used to the feel of something around their neck, little collars. I don't like collars on puppies when they're in their kennels or they just get in too much trouble. But do put them on there when they're eating. A very light slip lead, and just as you're feeding, just very very light tugs and little pressures, very, very light, barely tangible to the dog. If the dog turns and looks at you, it's too hard.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We just want the dog to start feeling things around its neck. And then when you're pairing that with food, the dog's so focused with the food, this is just a secondary.
Right.
Right? And then they're associating that feeling with eating, and you're golden.
Right.
Right? And then you just, increase pressure from there. In the beginning, when you're taking the dog out, when you put them down to go to the restroom, like they should be on a leash, right?
Right.
But do some of these drills first to make sure the dog understands the leash isn't going to hurt them.
Right.
Last thing you want is an 8 or 9 week old puppy flipping out because something's on its neck.
Yeah.
Right, and now you have to overcome a fear issue.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so a couple things we always hear from clients or they ask us about, and we're just not great at some of this. But what about the jumping up on your kid, your person that comes into the house? Comes in, they greet them. Do you have any idea like meaning behind that, or they're just being super social? And then mainly, what can we do to kind of prevent that and stop that?
Yeah, there are a lot of meanings behind it. Google it. Whether any of them are true, I don't know.
Right.
Like, there's all kinds of theories, and it really doesn't matter the why. Just we need to stop it. Now you have to know that with young dogs, with puppies, anything we associate negative, their brain is telling them to run away from. So you can't associate a negative too early with jumping. The point of that is you're going to have to allow some jumping, right? You're just going to have to
initially. Yeah.
Initially, it's going to be part of the developmental process, the dog exploring. If say, and I'm going to use a very broad, the knee up thing with dogs. Just I did a post about jumping, and somebody that was very knowledgeable, I guess, said when the dog jumps on you, just knee them in the chest as hard as they can. They won't do it anymore. Now my dogs, it just means game on. Right.
Right.
So
some take that for a challenge.
Right. With a little puppy, you can't thump them in the face. You can't do anything negative to make them fearful of you or the environment. So you're going to have to let go on for a little while. They're tiny, right? And when you start working on it, we'll go back to the leash. You're going to encourage them to jump, little kissy faces. I blow on their face. And I just take the leash and just give a little tug, when they're ready.
Right.
When it's ready, depends on confidence level. I would say 12 weeks old.
Okay.
That's just a range. You'll know when your puppy's ready. But all you're doing is associating a mild negative to that.
Okay.
Right? So every time I jump, it's bloop, bloop,
right.
Just a little tug.
Right.
But when I have my feet on the ground, or my butt's on the ground, that's when I get my reward.
Yeah.
So give a little tug with the leash, dog doesn't jump, then you reward.
Okay.
Right? So you're teaching the dog, feet on the ground is getting you something, reward is getting you a slight negative.
Okay. Is it pretty similar with the counter surfers too? Is that about the same kind of response that we ought to have to them?
It is with counter surfing because it ups the ante. We've had dogs that have eaten entire bottles of medication off counter.
Sure. Chocolate cakes,
whole
pizzas, ham. We've seen it all.
And how a dog can get an entire ham down its throat in 87 seconds, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
And all that's left is the bone, right? So the counter's a different thing. As little puppies, they can't get on the counter,
sure,
right?
Sure.
But as they get older, they can, and you just associate a higher level of negative, right? You can use loud sounds. One of my favorite ones is whatever the tasty treat is, tied to a bunch of aluminum cans, and they pull the treat off the counter, and all aluminum cans come falling down with it, right? Hopefully deterring the dog from the counter.
Okay.
My personal dogs, it'll be game on. They'd be like, oh, give me more cans.
Right.
But for the majority, all you're trying to do is trying to find some negative to associate with that counter.
Yeah.
Dogs are only responding to a positive and a negative, and the counter is where the food is, and it's where you are, and it's where you're fixing food, and you're eating food.
Right.
So why wouldn't the dog want to be there?
Right.
But there's so many things that can hurt the dog on the counter that we do have to take steps to say, hey, counter is off limits.
Right. Okay. What about socialization? Socialization obviously with other dogs, but we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but with people and environments and stuff. At what point do you start getting them out and exposing them more? There's kind of the medical side of things too, that there's, you want them to have at least a few more maybe vaccines on board, but kind of what's the balance and where do you see it kind of growing as they get older?
Yeah, when you get your puppy, take it as many places as you possibly can, and you can carry them.
Yeah.
You can put them in a buggy. There's all kinds of things you can do to get them out, but the more places you can get them, the more sounds. I like to take puppies downtown and just walk around with them. Trolleys, horse and buggies, so many sounds in one little place, and so many things to see. Big buildings, it's amazing what they can take in. But as soon as you can, get the dogs out. And even if you're going to use your dog for some type of protection or service work, let them be touched by people. Right. A lot of people.
Yeah. Because
it takes away that fear of the stranger, right? Mm-hmm. It's never going to stop your dog from barking at people or anything like that. But when they're little and they start to be approached and touched by people, it's going to decrease the likelihood that they are going to be fear aggressive toward people. Get them out as many places as you can. Take them absolutely everywhere. People will let puppies in just about anywhere. Yeah. And take them there. But on the medical side, like you're talking about, be careful where you take them with a bunch of dogs, putting them on the ground. Right. I have a friend who just lost a whole litter because she took them somewhere to get pictures.
Oh, well. Wow.
It's just
we've always kind of said, if you've got a family member, neighbor whose dog's got all its vaccines and healthy, sure, definitely start going and exposing them and meeting them, greeting them, that kind of thing. But you definitely want to have some vaccines on board. So
definitely.
So, Terry, we were talking before a little bit about how important it is to build confidence into your brand new puppy that you got. How do we? Well, first, why is that important, and then how do we do it?
Okay, a confident puppy is a trainable puppy, more easily trained puppy.
Okay.
Confidence is a direct result of exposure. We talked about a second ago, socialization, getting your dog out around things. Right. Dogs are responding, reacting to things they don't understand. Right? So if a dog encounters something new it doesn't understand, the first reaction was going to be a growl or a bark, and it's telling that thing to go away. Right. Right? If a dog sees something every day, like if you bring your dog to the clinic here, there's nothing that's going to happen at this clinic that catches the dog off guard, no matter how loud it gets or crazy. I'm sure you guys have some crazy emergency moments here. Right. And your dog just sleeps through it because it's used to hearing it all the time. Right. I would say the number one thing for confidence is climbing. Putting the dog on unstable surfaces. Yeah. Those Bosa balls with the platform on top. Yeah. Those are good to do food work on. Mm-hmm. Ramps, different textures of ramps, different the steepness of the ramp. Okay. Outside is a jungle gym if you want to stack wood. Or in your edge of your flower bed, anything the dog can climb on, can explore. Mm-hmm. Builds confidence. Okay. Right? When puppies come in, from day one, we are climbing with them. And if they won't go up, we put them on the top because they'll always go down. Right. And we're just luring them and using food to encourage them to climb. And before you know it, becomes a game, and then they're all over everything. Right. And then during that time, while you're climbing with them, you're introducing lots of sounds, loud sounds, different things. And that confidence building translates into a much, much easier pup to train. A pup that is less likely to have reactivity and fear aggression, because everything that's going on in this dog's world you've exposed it to and is normal. And when you find something that's abnormal and the dog's like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world, it's a mud puddle with a leaf in it, and it's going to kill me, I know, right? And it's the weird things like that.
Yeah, right.
Walk like, whoa. One of my dogs, I never got him over, was my main working dog, was grates in the concrete.
Oh, yeah.
Like drains.
Yeah, drains
Storm
in the
drain.
street,
Like, oh my
yes.
gosh.
Yeah.
He would, I don't care if he was running after somebody, he would go around or just hop over them.
Yeah.
It was silly. The dog would climb an attic, climb upstairs, a ladder, but would not walk over a grate.
Yeah.
And, little did I know, I didn't expose it to him.
Right.
Or expose him to it.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. So anything you can expose your dogs to, that climbing is really a huge confidence builder. Unstable surfaces is another big one. Those two things alone will make a dog way more confident than,
Right.
and exposing to water.
Okay.
Think about any dog you've had in the past and things that freak them out.
Yeah.
And intentionally expose the new puppy to that.
Right.
The nails, the Dremel of the nails,
Yeah.
a blow dryer, right?
yeah.
All of that stuff.
The vacuum cleaner.
The vacuum cleaner. And you can just put the vacuum cleaner on in another room and
Right.
do food work while the vacuum cleaner is running over here. And then the next time you do food work, just bring it a little closer.
Right.
Until eventually it's in the room.
Right.
Right? And then the dog's ignoring it because it's heard it this whole time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we hear the vacuum cleaner, or they get the broom out, and somehow that just
Yeah.
But like you said, exposing them early is really important and critical. What are some things that you see in terms of mistakes that a lot of new puppy owners are making? What are kind of maybe the top 2 or 3 or whatever that maybe you're getting in them for training and you're having to redo because they've already kind of messed up, or again, they're calling you and saying, hey, this is happening. But so what are some mistakes you see pet owners that, and I know there's a whole laundry list.
I'm going to limit to 3. The number one is treat them like a baby, like a human infant.
Right.
And it's hard not to, because we only know how to relate to dogs like we relate to humans. Like, we don't know how to relate to a dog like a dog relates to a dog. Like, I'm not licking its butt.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? But I do know how to comfort something when it's sad or upset or panicking, right? We intervene too quickly. We don't let the puppy sort things out. So the puppy gets startled by something or struggles with something. Instead of letting them work through it, we rush in and explain to them what's going on. And now the puppy's like, oh, when I whimper, when I do this, Mom comes over here and just does it for me.
Right.
Here's my paycheck. So letting dogs work through things themselves, not trying to comfort as much, not trying to treat them like an infant child, is probably I wouldn't say probably, is the number one problem that we see.
Right.
It's hard because they're cute.
Yeah.
And they're fluffy.
Right.
And they have puppy breath. And
Right.
they want to lick your nose. So we're fighting a battle that we won't completely win. However, that's the number one.
Yeah. Okay.
Number 2 is not giving the dog enough downtime, the puppy enough downtime. They are young. They are babies. They need a lot of rest. And not rest on our lap, and not rest on the floor in the living room. It needs to be structured rest. So they fall asleep on the floor, just like you would do your child, pick them up and take them to their crib or wherever they sleep. And let them get used to relaxing and resting in their crate when they're tired, instead of fighting that battle when they're wired and wide awake. You're doing kennel drills with them, and then you shut the door and like, no, I'm not going to be in here. Having a day where the dog has little bursts of energy. You're doing stuff with it, playing, or the dog's just romping and playing, and then 10 or 15 minutes after that, they're done.
Right.
And then put them in their kennel, cover them up, and just let them be. So taking a long day and breaking up into just small segments, right? Instead of trying to get this puppy to stay up with you and interact with you for 20 hours.
Right.
By giving that puppy playtime with triple the rest time that it was playtime, we'll give you a rested puppy, a puppy that's focused on you. Dealing with an exhausted puppy is like dealing with an exhausted toddler. Like, they're too sleepy to sleep. They're too sleepy to eat. They're too sleepy to rationalize. And so just everybody in the house is miserable.
Right.
So that would be number 2. The number 3 thing I would say people do with puppies is they give them everything they think they should have. Beds and toys and streamers and everything, right? You go in and there's a smorgasbord of stuff, right?
Right.
And so the dog is like, was it that thing or that thing or that thing? And it inadvertently creates a constant state of arousal or a state of disinterest in anything, right? So when you're playing with a dog or introducing a toy, like, have that be the toy.
Right.
Right. It doesn't need 37 toys out at one time to
Right.
go from one thing to another. You just end up with a dog that stays in arousal all the time as it goes into adulthood, is always looking for the next thing.
Right.
Right. So one toy, play session, interaction, rest.
Right.
Toy, play session, interaction, rest.
Okay. Yeah, those are great. Those are great. Let's see. Some people do ask, how do you differentiate between a puppy that's being playful and a puppy that actually is starting to slide towards an aggression scale, if you will? What is the difference, the growling puppy that's tugging on a sock versus, again, true aggression?
It's a good one. I will say with puppies, like they explore with their mouths.
Right.
So when I have little puppies I'm working with, I don't mind them chewing on my fingers, chewing on my arm. I actually encourage it. I'll put my finger behind their teeth and I'll kind of pull against it, because that's how they explore the world.
Right.
I don't want to limit that at first. I will rein that back after a while, but in the beginning, I do want them exploring me with their mouth.
Right.
When I say in the beginning, I mean like for a week.
Right.
Not for very long.
Right.
Now, when you start to get a dog that's guarding, when the dog barks at you and then retreats, that dog is trying to make you go away.
Right.
Whether it's a game or not, it doesn't matter. It develops into something worse later.
Right.
And then when you're like, oh my gosh, we get into this role playing and the dog barks and we over dramatize everything. And we're like, oh, look at the big bad dog. And now we're encouraging that behavior. Right.
Yep.
Very rarely will you get a puppy that's just aggressive. They don't understand that yet. There are a few that like come out of the womb like just not liking people.
Right.
Don't know how that happens, but it happens very rarely. So when you start to see the puppy challenging you for things with its mouth, then it's like we're not doing that, right? And if I'm playing a game with a dog, especially a puppy, I can't create a negative association with anything. So at this age, if I'm playing a game with a dog and the dog starts to challenge me, the game just goes away.
Just stop. Yep.
I reintroduce the game we're playing. The dog plays well. We're playing. The dog starts acting that way. I remove the thing that I'm doing. It's just like with our teaching dogs to search. We teach them to put their nose down. And then as they understand that, when their nose comes up, we freeze. We don't move. We become a statue. The only way they can get us to move is to put that nose back down again. And now they're off, right? And really quickly you get a dog that the nose won't come up. And in this puppy scenario, you'll get a dog that won't challenge you because it wants to play.
Right.
Couple questions for you. The first one being appropriate toys for puppies. There are so many toys. I was at Petco the other day and I was looking at the toys and I was overwhelmed. And I'm looking at some of the stuff, like some of it has metal stuff on it, some of it has eyeballs.
Right.
So as far as a safe toy for a puppy, what would be your direction?
Well, we definitely see issues with some of the toys that are, the little stuffed animal types. I'll be guilty and say I've used them myself, but as soon as you see anything start to fray, open up, the stuffing comes out, those things need to be in the trash, right? Because we'll, a lot of times we'll do, surgery on them because they've chewed up that stuffing and they just swallowed it, and that just makes a ball in their stomach. I had a dog eat his entire dog bed. The entire dog bed after he shredded it and all the stuffing was gone. The guy wondered where it went, and all of a sudden, of course, the next day he realized it was in his stomach. So that stuffing stuff, any of those, like you said, the little googly eyes, you really just got to be careful with them. I mean, especially, it does depend on the breed. If you had a pretty aggressive lab that's a puppy, you're probably not going to want to do that. If you have a smaller one that might just nibble on it or whatever, it might be okay. But you just got to watch them once they fray, once they start tearing up and they get kind of old. You got to throw those things out. I'm a big fan of Kongs. I think Kong's fairly indestructible. Nothing's indestructible with every dog, but where you can put treats into there and they can lick it out. It kind of stimulates their brain, I think, as well. And they have the little wobbler. I forgot the name of that. That shoots out food. They kind of bat it around, and that one works pretty well. I'm still, I still like Kongs, like something harder to chew on that's really not going to splinter or break apart. I wouldn't be, I do think, we got to avoid human food. Everybody wants to treat their new puppy with off the table, and really just, it's best just not to start. So try to avoid that, at least as a puppy. With the human food, it's anything greasy, fatty, peanut butter, that kind of stuff you just want to hold off on. We get a lot of questions about at what age should you consider doing or start a puppy class, puppies training session, so a legitimate class either with y'all or other groups. And then so kind of one is the age question, and then also what should they be looking for in a training class? Obviously it might depend on the breed and what the people obviously want to do with their dog, but what are some things to be looking for to kind of gauge what class they ought to go to and what group they ought to use?
Gotcha. So as far as a group class, definitely not till the vet says, okay, this dog can go out again. There's so much nasty stuff when you come to dog groups.
Right.
When we do our puppy classes, even the older classes, we sanitize everything. And at our new training location in Oakland, we're going to have a puppy room.
Oh, wow. Just dedicated for puppies.
Just for puppies. So no other dogs go in there, and it's sanitized, so we can start working with puppies at that 9-week-old age. Because there's a lot of need for that. When you're looking for a puppy class, try to find a small class, right? I would avoid the big box stores because it's not very personalized. The trainers there are pretty good. The ones here, I know them, they're pretty good, but they are limited to what they can do.
Right.
Like they're limited to the curriculum they have to teach. So if you have a behavior issue, you have something going on, they can't really speak to that. They'll send you to us.
Right.
But they can't really speak to that. Definitely check out reviews and see what people are saying about the class. 4 or 5 puppies in a class is a good number.
Okay.
Right? And know that when you go to a puppy class, it's an hour long, that you're only going to be working your dog for 10 or so minutes.
Right.
During that whole time. It's a lot of talking. Puppies have the attention span of a gnat. You don't want to go to a puppy class where the puppies are just let loose or just free for all. Like, make sure it's organized. Like, we have stations, things that the dog's doing this now and then this now. And the socialization time is at the end when they're a little tired.
Right.
And very well structured and organized where it's very intentional.
Right.
You want to do a puppy class where there's a lot of climbing. There's a lot of obstacle course stuff.
Okay. Trying to build that confidence.
Build the confidence. That is the key to a puppy class. Puppies are not really going to retain sits and downs. We're going to work them through them, and they're cute, and they give you something to do to build a bond with the dog. But they can't retain that. They don't have the mental aptitude yet. Their brain hasn't matured enough to retain it. So you'll do a whole class with them, or a series of classes, and you're a month into it, and you say sit, and the dog looks at you like, what?
Right.
But then you get that food. It's like, oh, I remember now.
Yeah.
And it's not that they'll only work for food. It's that they really can't retain it. It's like, I could. One of my children's really gifted, and probably in 4th grade, I could have written down an algebra problem, and he could have copied it.
Right.
But there's no way he could work it.
Right.
Because it's just like he doesn't have the mental aptitude to do it. So even though he knew the series of letters and numbers and parentheses, like, there's no way he could remember every step to do it.
Right.
So when you're doing these puppy classes, don't expect a trained dog at the end.
Right.
We're teaching you to have a relationship with your dog. We're teaching you how to properly communicate with your dog. We're teaching you how to get focused with food. We're teaching you how to give the dog corrections through leash, communication through leash, understanding pressure through the leash, and just laying the foundation. And if you're going to do any training in your dog's world, do not wait till they're 6 months old. Do it at the puppy level.
Yeah.
Right? Because we are not up against serious unwanted behaviors. Everything's new. So the younger you can get them in, as long as they have all their shots, the younger you can get them in, the easier you're going to make your world for the rest of your dog's life.
Right.
At 6 months old, about 5 months old is when they started developing that adult brain, and then now you're starting to have challenges. Right? They can retain stuff, yes, but also you're going to get more pushback than you will with a puppy. A puppy's going to be willing to do whatever you ask for food.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. That's great information. And what about in terms of if you wanted to do an individual or a one-on-one type session? Is that kind of the same thing in terms of age, I guess? Or
you can come younger. the dogs can come younger as long as the environment is clean, and you know that it is. Like, it's
Right.
not a public training environment where a bunch of dogs come through. Even with older puppies, you still want to be careful. We don't keep our puppies with the general population. We have a
Right.
different area for the puppies.
Right.
We have a different area that we let the puppies out. So you always want to be careful with that. But with individual private sessions, we're going to go through the same thing. The downside to it is there's no other dogs in the area, which can be an upside too with distractions. But you want your dogs to be working around other dogs.
Socializing.
Socializing. And socializing just means seeing another dog doing something but not participating.
Right.
Right. So you're doing all this food work with your dog. You haven't fed them their morning meal, so we're using their breakfast for food, or their lunch or evening meal, whichever time you choose to train. But the dog working with you, seeing these other dogs do all of this stuff, will cause them to just tune other dogs out while they're working with you. And that is the magic behind it all. You have 4, 5, 6 puppies all doing something independently, ignoring the others.
Right.
Right. Instead of like, oh, what's this dog doing? And having this whole giant puppy party.
Right.
Which we do have at the
Right.
end. But when you can get them to just ignore those other dogs,
Right.
like, you are way further ahead than you would imagine.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like years ago people were wanting to do like in-home visits and stuff, and I can see where you do get that group dynamic and the socialization. It's probably a better training environment with 4 or 5 puppies instead of just little Fluffy here at the house, because it's his environment, so you're not building that confidence up. So that's really good to know.